Welcome back to the Deep Dive. We're here to sift through the sources, pull out those key nuggets, and, well, get you well-informed, fast.
And today we're looking at an industry that, feels pretty solid, maybe even timeless. Country music.
Right, like a classic ballad. But behind the scenes, there are definitely some significant tremors happening. It's not quite the stable ground you might imagine.
Exactly. Even these big established institutions, they're not immune to shifts, sometimes pretty seismic ones.
And that's exactly where we're digging in today. Our mission is to get past the headlines. You might have seen the ones about major layoffs shaking up the country music world.
Yeah, specifically at the ACM Awards and also MCA Nashville.
We want to unpack the real story, the why behind these cuts.
Hmm.
What are the official statements maybe trying to paper over?
And what does it all signal about the future? For mainstream country music, I mean. What are the wider implications? What are people saying?
Our main source for this is a really detailed piece from Saving Country Music. It's titled, Major Layoffs Hit ACM Awards, MCA Nashville. Solid reporting there.
But what makes this really interesting is we're also diving into the comments section on that article.
Ah, yes. The comments. Always illuminating.
Definitely, you get these multiple perspectives, sometimes, well, brutally honest ones,
Yeah.
right from the community itself.
So look, whether you live and breathe country music, or you're just interested in how industries work, or maybe you're just curious about how these big organizations handle change.
Or maybe fail to handle it sometimes.
Ah, right. This deep dive is basically your shortcut to understanding these pretty critical shifts. Okay, let's get into it.
Let's do it.
So first, just the facts. What actually happened? Let's start with the Academy of Country Music Awards, the ACMs.
Okay, so picture this. The big awards show happens May 8th, 2025. Glitz, glamour, all that.
Right.
Then, just 1 month later, bam, they lay off a full quarter of their staff.
A quarter. That sounds significant.
Yeah.
How many people is that?
It works out to 5 people total.
5 people, okay. And do we know who, like, what kind of roles?
Yeah, and the source actually lists them, which kind of brings it home. It's not just numbers.
Right.
You've got Alexis Bingham, coordinator of events, Lexi Cothran, senior manager, communications and strategic initiatives, Jesse Netson, director of publicity and media relations, Brittany Antoniette, manager, creative and content production.
Wow. Okay, so communications, publicity, creative, events, those sound like pretty core functions.
Exactly. These aren't like peripheral roles. They're managing the public image, the events themselves, the content.
Yeah.
Losing people there, that's going to hurt operations.
No kidding. Okay, so that's the ACMs. What about MCA Nashville?
Right. So MCA, which for anyone not deep in the weeds, is basically the old UMG Nashville.
Part of Universal Music Group. Huge player.
Massive. And they reportedly laid off about a dozen staffers.
Okay, so it wasn't just the ACMs feeling the squeeze.
No, definitely seems broader. And what's really key here, something the Saving Country Music article stresses, is the meaning of these numbers.
Go on.
Well, 5 people or 12 people. Maybe it doesn't sound like a catastrophe in, like, absolute terms.
Yeah, compared to tech layoffs or something.
Right. But think about it. 25% of your staff gone, like at the ACMs, assuming they have around 20 people total, which seems implied.
Yeah.
That's proportionally huge. The article compares it to, say, Microsoft or GM laying off thousands. It's a major, major cut for an organization that size.
Wow, yeah. That really reframes it. It's not just a little trim, it's a big chunk.
It's a tremor, like you said, not just a ripple. Suggests something deeper might be wrong in that traditional country music world, a real restructuring.
Okay, that puts it into perspective. So those are the facts on the ground. Now, the spin.
The spin. Always got to look at the spin.
The ACM Awards, well, predictably, they put out a statement that sounded pretty positive, didn't it?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. All about coming off a successful 60th ACM Awards week and their renewed deal with Prime Video through 2028, Sunshine and Roses.
And then they talk about the layoffs as, what was it, a strategic staff realignment.
Right, to support its future business and growth initiatives. Standard corporate language, resulting in elimination of 5 staff positions.
And of course, they thank the individuals for their contributions. But, I mean, does that really track? Cutting a quarter of your team right after a supposedly successful week?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? How successful was it really? That corporate speak, it only goes so far.
And the source article jumps right on that, right? Particularly the Prime Video deal.
It does. It flags this feeling that the ACMs are on, quote, shaky ground now that they're off network TV.
Why shaky?
Well, network TV, for all its own issues, it gives you broad reach and you get Nielsen ratings, public third-party numbers. Imperfect, maybe, but transparent.
Okay. And Prime Video.
It's a black box. Amazon can say it was a huge success, talk about engagement, but who's checking? There's no independent verification. You just have to trust them.
Right. Which maybe you do, maybe you don't. That lack of transparency alone is a bit of a red flag.
Definitely raises eyebrows.
Okay, so Prime Video hides the real numbers, potentially. And what about MCA? What was their story for letting go of a dozen people?
Pretty similar playbook, honestly. Reorganization, trimming fat, focusing on digital and social media strategies.
Standard, like a strategic pivot. Business as usual, almost.
That's how they frame it. But again, does that business as usual explanation really hold water? Or is something else going on in the major label world?
This is where the source really cuts through, isn't it?
Yeah, it lays it out pretty bluntly. Quote, "You don't lay off a dozen people if everything is going well."
Simple as that.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
That one line just slices through the PR. It basically says the official statements are damage control.
Yeah.
These aren't minor tweaks when you're talking about these kinds of numbers at major players.
You don't lay off a dozen people if everything is going well.
Yeah.
That really sticks. It makes you ask, okay, if things aren't going well, what are the deeper trends here?
And the article goes there. It asks the big questions. Is something fundamentally, quote, amiss in the major label world?
Or, and this is a big one, are these companies just getting a, quote, head start on the inevitable replacement of virtually all human labor with AI?
Whoa. Yeah, that's a heavy possibility to consider.
It really is. And the source suggests this isn't just about, one or two companies having a bad quarter. It could be part of a deepening trend.
Right. And that trend could mean a couple of things. Either, like the article says, emerging weakness in the major label world. Their whole model is sputtering. Or it's a conscious, dramatic shift to streamline manpower and rely more on AI and younger talent to replace the old guard.
So less focus on traditional A&R guys, finding talent in bars, maybe more.
Okay.
Data analysis, AI sorting through demos, social media metrics.
Could be. Fewer humans doing the scouting, the relationship building, the artist development, replaced by algorithms and maybe younger, cheaper digital natives. It's a potential massive shift in how music gets made and promoted.
And then there's the internal politics angle too, right?
Yeah.
That comment you mentioned.
Oh, yeah, that was fascinating. From a commenter named Fran. They suggested the MCA layoffs might have been specifically about clearing out the, quote, last vestiges of the Mabe regime.
Mabe regime.
Yeah.
So like people loyal to a previous leader.
Exactly. Cleaning house, getting rid of Mabe supporters. So it's not just market forces or AI. It could also be about settling old scores, internal power plays.
That adds a whole other layer, doesn't it? Something you'd never get from the official statements.
Never. It's usually a mix, right? Market pressures, tech shifts, and internal stuff all tangled together. You got to look at all of it.
Absolutely. Okay, so let's pivot to those comments you mentioned. Voices from the community reacting to the Saving Country Music article. This is where you get the raw takes.
Definitely. And reading through them, wow, you get a real cross-section of how people are feeling.
What stood out to you?
Well, there's this one from Sophus. Pretty blunt, basically. Nobody cares anymore.
Ouch. About what?
Yeah.
The award shows, the labels.
Kind of everything traditional. Their argument is younger people get content online instantly. They don't watch things like the ACMs or the Grammys.
Okay. A familiar argument.
Yeah, and Sophus thinks streaming companies, except maybe Netflix, are dying. And record companies, film studios, they're next.
Wow. So total disruption.
Totally. They literally say, you don't need a big company to back you up anymore. A YouTube video will do the same as MCA.
It's a pretty extreme take. But is there a kernel of truth? Especially at award shows. Are they becoming dinosaurs?
It's a fair question, and Sophus isn't done. They also really dislike, quote, modern music. Specifically calls out tattooed hip-hop artists calling themselves country singers.
Ah, so there's a stylistic preference there too, a traditionalist view.
Definitely. They prefer old books, old TV shows, old movies, real-life stuff. Less noise and light, as they put it. It really highlights this generational or taste divide within the audience.
Interesting. What else?
There's a short, sharp comment from Jerry. Just says, if you've been following independent country music the past 10 years, this should come as no surprise.
Implying the writing's been on the wall for a while, at least outside the mainstream.
Seems like it. Like the independent scenes saw this coming. These issues have been simmering.
Okay. Any others?
There's a very cryptic one from Cornicaster. Eventually, the zombies have to be dealt with.
The zombies. Okay. Metaphorical, I hope.
One assumes. But it suggests, some kind of long-standing decay or problem that's been festering and now has to be addressed. Pretty evocative.
Definitely. And wasn't there a bit of a back and forth in the comments about the significance of the numbers?
Yes. Trent Dawson commented that he actually expected numbers larger than 5 and 12, sort of downplaying it. But Trigger, who wrote the article, jumped in and pushed back. Explained why 5 people, 25% of a small org, or a dozen at a major label, really are significant.
Right. Connecting it back to that potential deepening trend. It's not just the count, it's what it might signal about the industry's health.
Exactly. Context matters. And Fran, the commenter who mentioned the MABE regime,
Yeah.
they also added that the ACMs, on the other hand, have been on life support for years, reinforcing that idea of long-term weakness for the awards show itself.
So not a sudden collapse, but maybe a final straw situation for some of these roles.
Could be.
And then there was a really practical concern raised, wasn't there, about music catalogs?
Oh, yeah. TX Bryan brought that up. Super relevant. They asked, how will this affect back catalogs of older artists if MCA UMG goes under?
Goes under. Wow, that's thinking worst case scenario.
Well, yeah, but it's a valid fear in the digital age. They said, considering how many artists are under that umbrella, I'd hate to know that their music would poof out of existence.
Poof, out of existence. That's terrifying for fans. Losing access to potentially decades of music if the label or its digital systems fail.
It really is. A modern anxiety about cultural preservation tied directly to corporate stability.
Amidst all that, any optimism?
A little glimmer. A commenter named Wayne just wrote, "Hope springs eternal."
Huh. Short and sweet. A reminder that some people still believe in the industry's ability to bounce back or reinvent itself.
Exactly, even when things look gloomy.
So when you take all these reactions together,
Hmm.
the cynicism, the concern, the indie perspective, the practical fears, that little bit of hope,
Mhm.
what does it all mean for you, the listener?
Well, it points to this landscape that's changing incredibly fast, doesn't it? How you find music, who holds the power, the artists, the labels, the streaming platforms, it's all in flux.
Are we watching like the slow crumble of the old guard? Or is it just a really painful, messy evolution into something new?
That's a big question, isn't it? It's not just about the labels. It affects the whole chain. Production, distribution, discovery, even preservation. How music reaches your ears.
Okay, so let's just quickly recap where we've been. We looked at the specific layoffs, ACM Awards, MCA Nashville.
Right. Contrasted the official spin with the more critical takes and the underlying numbers.
We touched on those bigger industry questions, AI's role, health of the major labels, internal politics even.
And we heard that whole spectrum of reactions from the community: indifference, deep worry, calls for change.
It seems pretty undeniable that the mainstream country music industry is standing at some kind of major crossroads.
Absolutely. The changes aren't just about tech. They feel really fundamental, cultural, structural, reshaping things we took for granted.
Which brings us to our final thought, something for you to maybe mull over after you're done listening.
Okay.
Considering everything we've talked about, the shift to streaming, indie artists rising, AI potentially shaking things up, audiences maybe tuning out traditional awards, how does the very definition of success in music change in the next few years?
That's a big one. What does success even look like anymore?
Right. What new models might pop up for artists to actually make a living, to thrive? And what does that mean for the artists you love, the music you listen to?
Yeah, what parts of this whole system are actually built to last, and what parts might be, well, on the verge of a really dramatic transformation?
Definitely something to think about. It's a fascinating, if maybe unsettling time to be watching this space.